Happy New Year to all of you. Welcome to our January 8th Commission meeting. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then a 10-second moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stand. You may be seated. Randy, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Hanna.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hoofnagel.
Here.
Commissioner Palumbo.
Here.
Commissioner Robel.
Here.
Mayor Kennedy.
Yes, here.
All present, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Agenda item number 1 is the report of the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office with Corporal Duncan giving us a report tonight. Please come forward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And looking at the statistics from last month to this month, the biggest thing is there have been 4 larcenies or thefts that have taken place compared to last month. Those were the biggest. One was a grand theft that took place over at 760 Gulf Boulevard. Apparently somebody was visiting and had some stolen currency, foreign stolen currency. There was a felony theft at the CVS at 353 Gulf Boulevard, and that was because the person who was arrested had prior theft convictions, so this particular one made it a felony. Then there was a grand theft other at 2511 Bay Boulevard, Unit B, which was more of a civil-related rental purchase of a townhome. Someone was either renting it or going to purchase it, and furniture and some paintings inside the residence weren't there, and I guess the person who was selling it thought that they were not included in the deal. And then there was a petty theft at 1308 Gulf Boulevard number 4. Apparently 2 bikes were stolen. There was a red bicycle and a large Schwinn bicycle with no known suspects. Other things that stand out are our normal activities for the month, which includes traffic control or traffic stops. There were 376 of them, which include traffic citations as well as traffic warnings. We try to do our best to educate drivers and not just hand out stiff fines, but when the fines are needed, they are applied. House checks, in a total of 75. We had directed patrols, which could include traffic control, could be the directed patrols walking the beaches, walking the beach accesses, walking the dog park, or walking in areas where we've been given information that there's suspicious activity taking place. Special details, same thing. Usually when there's some form of traffic enforcement that's taking place, somebody who's radar or laser certified will set up and do traffic enforcement, and the other deputy will be a chase car, and they do those details quite often. We had 34 assist citizen calls, which could be something as simple as somebody calling saying, I don't understand how this parking meter works. Or, I locked my keys in my car, can you get somebody to help me get my keys out? Suspicious persons, which is usually when the deputies are out on a directed patrol or they're out at night walking on the beach and they notice somebody's out there that, during hours or at a place at a time that people aren't normally out, so they make contact with them. Same thing with the suspicious vehicles, there were 16 of those. Also had traffic control events that took place, information other, which is sometimes people will call in and say, I haven't talked to my neighbor in 3 or 4 days. Usually I see them every day when they go out to get the paper. Could you guys go by and check on them? Prisoner transport, that's usually when an arrest has been made in the city and the transportation van comes to the city to pick up the arrested subjects. Contact calls, same thing similar to the information, people just concerned about their neighbors or want contact to be made with somebody regarding a minor issue. Actual traffic violations, those would be traffic citations, usually written regarding traffic accidents or during a traffic enforcement. We had 7 trespasses, which businesses or residents will call in because somebody's on their property and they don't want them there, so a trespass is issued. We had 7 alarm calls, which either looks like they were more than likely weather-related or just false alarms. We had some noise complaints, which come from either residents or residents about other residents or residents regarding the businesses that have music. We had 6 thefts. We had 6 ordinance violations, which could either be dog barking, some sort of parking issue or something to that degree. We had 5 accidents, 5 disorderly conduct, which is usually somebody in an establishment that's making a scene and not wanting to leave. We had 3 vandalisms, which were not in progress. Had 5 animal calls, which that could be from a barking animal or animal being tethered or someone not picking up after their animal. We had 3 ambulance and fire department calls, which is usually when they call us when they need assistance, if they have to make forced entry or they have a patient that they need help with. And we also had 3 neighbor problems where we hopefully assisted 2 neighbors to see eye to eye about an issue they were having. Main highlights, we had some felony arrests, one of which was possession of a controlled substance and tampering or harassing with a victim or witness. We had misdemeanor arrest, which was domestic related. Also had a misdemeanor arrest for criminal mischief and disorderly intoxication. There was also a violation of domestic injunction. There was 1 warrant arrest. There were some traffic felonies, one of which was driving under the influence. The other one was a habitual traffic offender. Then there was also a misdemeanor arrest for driving under the influence, coupled with leaving the scene of an accident with damage, along with no valid driver's license, and refusal to submit to a breath test. And that can all be coupled or explained with, possession of a controlled substance was at Krabby Bill's. It initially came in as a disorderly subject. Apparently there was a female there who they weren't sure if she was intoxicated or under the influence of some sort of narcotic. We got there, she continued to be disorderly. She was placed under arrest. Once she made it out to county jail and she was sent through the x-ray machine, it was actually found that she had contraband hidden inside her person. Good thing about that was she was a non-Florida resident. She's not from around here. She was on vacation. Pardon the phrase, but she left on probation. The other one with the tampering and harassing a witness, that was at 618 Gulf Boulevard. It was a domestic related battery where the phone was taken from the victim while they were trying to call 911. Those 2 particular subjects are residents of Indian Rocks Beach. Then we had the DUI, the refusal, the habitual traffic offender. Those were all during the same incident. And then there was also possession of a controlled substance at 15th and Gulf Boulevard. It was for a traffic stop, which turned into a DUI. And during the impound portion of the vehicle where they're searching it to make sure that everything is on the form that goes with the tow service to make sure everything is accounted for as far as inventory, they found a felony amount of marijuana in the vehicle. That person also was not a resident of Indian Rocks Beach. They happened to be passing through using Gulf Boulevard as a thoroughfare to get from point A to point B. And as it all breaks down, that is the highlights of last month.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to ask a question? Sharon? Just one question. You mentioned the noise.
Yes.
Could you know the restaurants that it was pertaining to?
I do not have, I can find that out for you.
Yes.
And I can, because this is just the raw data.
You can email me.
Okay.
Or
Which I can, and it may not even have been restaurants,
Okay.
but I know in the past, you know, the music
Sometimes.
sometimes has been an issue in the past, so that may have been a bad assumption on my part. But I'll look into it and let you know.
Thank you.
Do you
Yes.
know if they tracked down the guy and did anything about him today, the Red Lion incident?
I'll contact you this afternoon. I'll meet with Captain Liner in the morning after I meet, then I'll send you a line or something.
Anyone else? Thank you. I want to just remind all of the audience that every meeting that we have, the sheriff is here 15 minutes earlier so that anyone who would like to have a conversation with him before the meeting, that they are more than welcome to do so. Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys have a wonderful evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Agenda item number 2 is public comment. Any member of the audience may come forward, give their name and address, and state any comment or concern that they may have over any matter which the City Commission has control, excluding agenda items. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Hi, Kelly.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Sistrick. I live at 448 Harbor Drive South. And I wanted to give you a little update about concerning the fire district. The Pinellas Suncoast Fire and Rescue District will be placing a new referendum on the March 12th election ballots. The referendum will ask voters to approve a $100 increase to our current non-ad valorem assessment, which is currently set at $260. And the increase will apply to most categories of businesses as well as residential. The last increase to this assessment was in 2008. The last referendum of the fire district in November 2016 sought to add a new tax, and it was overturned by a judge. That new tax was never imposed. As a result, the voters in the fire district continue to have the sole authority to approve increases. The fire district held a meeting on the referendum at January the 8th, and that was the first reading. The second reading will take place on January 15th, and that will be at Bel Air Beach Town Hall. The details can be found on the district's website, and that is psfrd.org. Now, I want to give my personal opinion about the referendum. My husband, John Fanshill, and I were among the biggest opponents of the 2016 referendum, so you might be surprised to hear me say that I personally support this $100 increase. Without it, the district will become unable to fund its 24-hour operations at the current service level, which is operating 3 stations. Chief Burton estimated that the district will have to use up all remaining reserves in the next 5 years based on their current income versus their expenses. And I don't want to let this happen. This $100 increase is a 38% increase, and while that might sound like a lot, it is only a small fraction of what the last referendum would have cost the majority of voters in the town. I have a great deal of confidence in Chief Burton's willingness to work with Pinellas County, and that will be necessary in an effort to build or rebuild fire stations. John and I are committed to helping the district get some additional funding via our county EMS tax, and there may be a time in the future where the city has an opportunity to partner with the district to help replace our 50-year-old fire station that's located in the Business Triangle. I would also like to ask our city manager to include upcoming fire district meetings on our own city's website as a courtesy to residents. The meetings now rotate between Indian Rocks Beach, Indian Shores, and Bel Air Beach, so it's now easier to get to one when they're here in town, but it's harder to figure out where it is. Thank you.
Kelly, before you sit down, would you tell the audience your position? You have a position.
I serve as a task force member. There's a task force at the fire district formed to try and figure out what they should be doing to find new revenue sources and to get citizen input as well as business owners' input and rental managers. And myself and Matt Loader from Krabby Bill's served for Indian Rocks Beach. Him as a business owner and me as an individual citizen. But I just wanted to, tonight I'm here in my capacity as an individual citizen to give my opinion on the referendum.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak tonight? Please come forward.
Good evening, I'm Patty Moneo. I live at 309 Mahia Vista Drive, Indian Rocks Beach. After hearing this comment about the fire district, the one thing I think that somebody needs to look into is the fact that our fire department is not always recompensated by the county for the EMS visit they have to do because the city of Largo will not pick them up. And this is where part of the budget problem lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Is there anyone at this time who would like to come forward?
Just under citizens' comments, right? Still there. Good evening. John Fansfield, 448 Harbor Drive South. Later tonight, we'll be discussing whether to give voters a referendum on term limits. I think that'll be one of the more interesting portions of this evening. I'd like to have you consider a second referendum. Some cities have recognized that governmental bodies which have power over zoning and variances should be limited in the number of members having ties to real estate and development. For example, Austin has in its charter about their planning commission, quote, a minimum of 2/3 of the members shall be lay members, not directly or indirectly connected with real estate and land development. The voters approved this limit. IRB's commission obviously has the power over zoning and variances. A majority of commissioners can change the face of IRB forever by allowing big condos or by increasing building height. Giving the voters a referendum for a charter change could be worded similarly, like a majority of the members shall be lay members not directly or indirectly connected with real estate and land development. I think that would be a good step towards protecting the low-rise nature of our city, and I hope this commission considers that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward at this time during public comment? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll go on to agenda item number 3, which is the report of the city attorney. Randy, do you have a report tonight?
I do, Mayor. Briefly, last Friday I had the opportunity to lecture to members of the Clearwater Bar and government officials from the 3 local counties concerning website accessibility and ADA compliance. Towards the end of this month, I will be, along with my colleague Jay Daigneault, lecturing at the Institute for Elected Municipal Officials during their quarterly seminar. Additionally, I wish to inform you that as recently as last week, I was elevated to partner in my law firm, and I am now a partner in the law firm. That does nothing to change the rates you're billed, as I know the very next question that typically comes with that. Nothing to change the contract we have or any of the rates in that regard. Just to note that for your purposes, so you're aware of that. Other than that, I continue to work with the city manager on a number of issues and city staff, and look forward to serving you guys and working in this new year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Is there anyone on the commission who has a comment or question for Randy tonight? We will go to agenda item 3B, report of the city manager. Greg, would you like to give your report?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. And congratulations, Randy, on the partnership. I just have 5 quick things. I can report to you that after a lot of work by staff, we received our first initial check for reimbursement from IRMA. We have in the neighborhood of about $200,000 that we spent, mainly with debris, hauling debris. Last week we received a $25,000 check, or in that neighborhood, and we're working with we filled out all the paperwork for FEMA now that we're down to the state level. We're having to fill out the same paperwork with the state. We believe we'll be fully reimbursed. It's going to be a long process, but we'll let you know when we receive additional money. Projects, the pickleball court construction started today. The street reconstruction project started, and this is a reminder that 2nd Street from 28th to Bay Boulevard, Bay Pine Boulevard from 12th to 15th, Bay Pine Boulevard from 12th to 15th, and 1st Street from 14th to 15th. And that's, as you know, a complete reconstruction of those streets. Also this week, the Gulf Boulevard undergrounding project started. That starts at the Indian Shores, IRB, Mutual City Limit Line. Then we'll go to 5th. That process is going to take about 7 months. So just get ready for barricades and people directing traffic. And after they finish that, then the utilities will come in and pull the cable. So it'll be a while before that's finished. And Dean will have the joy of dealing with a lot of that. One thing that's interesting that I'm looking into, this is actually a result of a meeting that Nick and I had with a couple of people about 6 weeks ago. I'm actually having conversations with Duke right now about trying to locate several charging stations for electric vehicles, more where people are having those, and they'll come in and do it at no cost. I'm reading the fine print. You know, anytime anybody gives you something, there's usually a catch on the other end. I'm trying to figure that out, but as we figure out the mechanics of that, and if we're going to go forward with it, I'll come back and tell you what's going on about that. We're working on that. Last, and I just want to put this out here, and Victor, who's working now with us for a year or so, if you got any questions, you can ask him. But I sent y'all an email on December the 19th, and Randy touched on something that cities throughout Florida are having to deal with now, is if you have websites that have to be ADA compliant, we have to deal with Spanish speaking issues, the variety of laundry list things now that we have to do. Because what's happening is there's attorneys that are going from town to town suing cities because their websites and things are not compliant with this list of guidelines. And one of the things that we run into is, as you all know, a year or so ago, we started the process of videoing these meetings and placing those on the internet and on the website. And I've been tracking those. We talked about this during the budget session. We're averaging about 6 views a month for the efforts that we're putting in to put these up. And you know, every newsletter we send out, every postcard we send out, anything we send out, press releases, we always remind people that we got C-Click Fix, you can use that to turn complaints, and then we also remind them about the access to view videos. But what this has led to is, and I'll tell you this from looking at this before the commission agreed to hire Victor and his company. You know, we put out an RFP, and Victor's very reasonable price. This is nothing against Victor and his company, but is my email related to y'all, the rate that we pay for the services of recording these meetings and placing them on the internet, and he does all that for us, is about $845 a month. To comply with the new ADA requirements and have closed captioning, that would be another additional $499 a month. So I would just put that out publicly. I'll be happy to answer any questions. You might have to step from behind the camera into the podium, but I just want, because what I intend to do is, I want to do differently is, because it's obviously not a budgeted amount, is that we answer questions tonight, we'll put it back on the agenda, and then y'all can tell us what we're going to do going forward. But that's what we're looking at, is the $499. And Randy touched on the other part that I'll be spending a lot of time on now, working with Randy, is figuring out all the boxes that we're going to have to check to update our website to make sure we meet all the requirements just for that. But Victor had given me the quote. I wanted to get that to you. I got that to you on the 19th. I'm bringing it up. Victor, I'm sure, will be happy to answer any questions y'all have. That's kind of the limit of my expertise in this, but it is something y'all are going to make a decision about how we're going to handle that. And I'll be happy to answer any questions on this or anything else I covered or didn't cover.
Does anyone have any questions for Greg concerning any of the topics he brought up?
Just
Yeah.
one, and it's not specifically for us, but the Bel Air construction that's impacting any update on, do we have any?
Well, I'll tell you one interesting thing is that Dean was out for a while for the holiday. I was out until this morning. Is that Dean was approached by the city manager from Bel Air Beach, and lo and behold, the speed tables, was it a speed table or speed table they put in is inside our corporate limits. So Dean politely informed the Bel Air city manager that they went to rip out the speed table. If they want one, they need to put it on their side of the city limit line. So some of the work they've done to put that in, they're going to have to move it, because it was all done while we were gone. But they'll move, I'm assuming they're gonna move it, it just replaces a few feet back in their city limit line and they'll open it back up, but that's the status of that.
Anyone else have any questions for the city manager?
As far as the construction, I was coming up Gulf Boulevard this morning, probably about 10 o'clock, and they did have their truck blocking the walkway and the bikeway, and probably 6 guys standing around watching one guy mark something on the cement, and there were people trying to get by the truck, walking and biking, no traffic control, no
Yeah,
anything.
they can speak
Yeah,
to this, they said that they had a kickoff meeting this morning, and they covered all that about safety and flagging and how they're gonna handle that, so I think you'll see a kickoff.
All right, they didn't have it this morning.
But, and those were not city employees that were standing watching one.
No,
one guy.
no, they were the,
Okay, just wanna make sure.
they were the people who were paying a lot of money to do that.
Okay, reports of the city commission. I'm going to start with our wonderful vice mayor, Ed Hoffnecker. Would you like to?
Sure, thank you. A few, 6 months ago, I started to get involved with the Beach Arts Center. I serve as the treasurer on the board of directors there, and I got involved, excuse me, because the Arts Center is a wonderful treasure for our community. I'm a retired financial person. I have no creativity whatsoever. However, other people do, and I want to make sure that we have this facility for the next 40 years. The Arts Center opened up in the mid-70s, about 20 years after the city reincorporated. So if the city started doing business as a city in the 50s, just a couple decades later, the Arts Center opened up, and we've been working together for those 40 years since. Some news I wanted to bring up is that the Arts Center approved its operating budget this past board meeting, and we're slotted to make $38 in profit by the end of the year. It's a not-for-profit, but our fund balance will be positive by $38. Of course, that's after 32% of our expenses are met by donations, so I think you see where I'm going with this. Donations, when you pay for tuition for an art class, it covers about 70 cents of the expense of the class. The rest is covered by civic donations to help the Arts Center run. The city's been generous in the past. What happened this year is we realized that there's a tremendous amount of capital investments that are required to keep the Arts Center going. Everything from replacing the air conditioning systems to replacing the storage shed, the windows, storm hardening, ADA access for the bathrooms, the list goes on. The capital improvement forecast is approximately $500,000 over the next 5 to 10 years. I say it's a range because we have no idea. Whenever we get the money, we'll try to put it in and help the facility. So what am I here for? A couple things. One is to ask that you consider in the budget year, perhaps some minor allocation towards the capital infrastructure that might be required to help the Arts Center meet some of its infrastructure needs. 2, we're having an annual fundraiser right around Mardi Gras time called a Venetian Carnival, and we're hoping to use that as a way for the citizens to get involved and to help raise some money, also to populate the capital fund and also to meet our existing donations. It's a costume type event, gala, with entertainment, dancing, all kinds of interesting things, including an auction. So please get your tickets, they're going fast, and you can look online for that. And third, I wanted to ask Cookie and Greg, you guys to think about when you're dealing with the county and with other beach communities, maybe if it comes up about the Arts Center serves not only Indian Rocks Beach, but people throughout the barrier islands. And it's always difficult to ask, but if you, I'd be happy to go ask them if maybe they would consider making a budget allocation to help also raise the money so that we can continue to have this treasure in our community for the next 40 years. That's it. Thanks.
And, you know, maybe we could have you talk to Mayor Leslie from Bel Air Beach. She's the chairperson right now. And see if you could get on the agenda for the Big C at one of the coming up meetings to kind of talk about, you know, what the plight is of the Arts Center.
That'd be great.
Okay, we'll get you the number.
Thank you.
Commissioner Norvell?
Yes, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2019. Real quick, let's start with the Art Center. I know the city years ago used to give, I think at one time it was $50,000 a year to the Art Center, and then it dropped, and then dropped to nothing. I'm sure RB could, educate us on that over the years. But I wouldn't mind seeing, up in a nice donation to the Art Center, because it is a great asset to our city. And, I think we're down a couple of employees right now from what we set for the budget. So I think there's some extra money in there that we could probably put it on the agenda and do something this year, in the budget year. That would be great. I'm just wondering if the city has heard anything about the Red Lion being sold.
I know it's for sale, I'm not heard, so.
Okay, all right, because someone emailed me today that someone finally bought it, so I didn't know if, because they have to come to you.
Yeah, we've had some communication with a couple of gentlemen that were looking at buying it, but I've not heard anything that could provide that.
Okay. All right, and I think it's interesting what John brought up about limit developers and real estate people on the commission. I think that's something that the commission could look into now. This year, look into that just to see how the other cities handle it, what they do going forward. So, and the one last thing, I know this has been a bone of contention with me for a while, and that's putting the ballards in, like in front of Jake's and up to Krabby's a little bit, because I know the police are there stopping people left and right. I don't know if you know what we're talking about. When cars are coming north on Gulf Boulevard, they'll start driving down the bike lane and the sidewalk, walking lane around Krabby Bill's, and just travel up that way. And basically the police have been, pulling people over, but as soon as the police are gone, it happens continuously. And during the season, as we want to call it, I was walking there one day and I looked behind me and there was a couple with a baby and a stroller, and behind them was a car right on their butts driving. And it's like, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm trying to turn on Walsingham. So, I just think it's something we need to really look into and try to get those ballards up there. I don't know what you exactly call them. I call them ballards.
Yeah.
I know we'll be replacing a lot of them like Bel Air does on a regular basis, but I think the safety of it is well worth the expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Commissioner Palumbo?
Thank you, and Happy New Year to everyone. I'm going to keep it short because I'm not feeling 100%, so I don't have a great voice tonight. I just wanted to say there's a lot going on in the city right now. I know we just mentioned the undergrounding and talked to a lot of people. I would say be patient. There's a lot of really good things happening on our streets and construction that's going on with pickleball and everything else. So as I ride my bike around and walk around and talk to people, everybody's excited about what's coming up, and we're going to have to put up with a little traffic here and there, but be patient. It's going to all work out and be beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
I wish everyone a Happy New Year and congratulate Randy on becoming a partner. That is quite a well-earned achievement. So welcome on that. Not a whole lot. I'm anxious to get to the rest of the meeting, and I know we're all wanting to talk about term limits. And as a realtor, John, I'm just tickled to death to be here. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think I've ever made a decision that has been in my personal interest or the interest of the real estate people. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you, everyone. I'm glad you're all here tonight. Happy New Year again. There's been 3 pieces about where we were, what we did and accomplished in 2018, and what we plan to do this year. And I also left a message as the Mayor Commissioner of Indian Rocks Beach, if any of you would like it tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about the events we have coming up this month. And on the 10th, Krabby Bill's, where the homeowners will have their get-together. It's from 6 to 7:30. We also have a service day on January 19th from 9 to 11 with Action 2000, and that will be on 10th Avenue Park. We have our Candidates Forum on January 23rd from 7 to 8:30. It will be held here in the auditorium if any of you would be interested in coming. At the beginning of next month, Monday with the mayor will be 4 to 6:30. Next, it would be February 4th. And I'd like to tell everyone that has come and participated that I've had up to 20 people at some of the meetings, and I think they're going very well, and I really appreciate everybody's support and coming out and talking to me. On February 7th, 18 on the Rocks will be the location of the homeowners' next event. And then, of course, we have our meeting on the 12th, February 12th at 7 p.m. I think that is it, and with that, we're going to go on to number 4, additions and deletions. Are there any additions and deletions tonight? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And Randy, would you read the consent agenda by title?
Yes, Mayor, there's one item on the consent agenda. Item A, approval of the December 11, 2018 regular city commission meeting minutes.
There is an error that I noticed, and it references Pat Marzullo, the gentleman who swam in California, and he is not from Largo. His address is 322 12th Indian Rocks Beach, and I just wanted to clarify that he is an Indian Rocks Beach resident. With that, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda with the amendment to the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. We'll go to agenda item 6A, which is a public hearing of ordinance number 2019-01. Randy, please read the ordinance by title.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item 6A, ordinance number 2019-01, an ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, providing for amendments to the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 110 zoning, Article 1 in general, Section 110-1 definitions to define paid parking lots, amending Article 3 district designation and regulations, Division 1 generally, Section 110-131 establishment of zoning districts, subsection 6 business zoning district B, to provide for paid parking lots as a permitted use in the Business District Triangle Overlay Zone, amending Article 3, District Designation and Regulations, Division 1, generally, Section 110-135, Business District Triangle Overlay Zone, to allow the operation of paid parking lots, providing for repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith to the extent of such conflict, providing for severability, providing for renumbering, and providing for an effective date. This has been a reading of ordinance 2019-01 by title only on first reading, Mayor.
Thank you, Randy. Greg, would you like to
Let Randy kick it off.
You want to let Randy? Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
No problem. So this is, I'm trying to remember, it's hard for me sometimes because I cover both meetings to remember what happened in which. I can tell you this, the genesis of this began with a resident of the town who owns property within the business triangle district, suggesting an interest in doing this with their property, learning that it is not on the list of enumerated uses. The city has taken the position that to the extent something is not an enumerated use, it is therefore not permitted, which I think is the appropriate interpretation. And the request was made to the city to entertain this thought. And I believe, though my recollection may be mistaken, that this body said, we'd be interested in seeing what this looks like. Let's see what planning and zoning comes up with and what happens as it marinates down there. This did go before planning and zoning, and they did consider the matter, and that's reflected in the agenda materials. Ultimately, the vote was with one voting against the proposal, as I recall. What this would do, to be very clear, is allow for the operation of private paid parking lots, or garages for that matter. Paid parking is how it's presently structured. Specifically and exclusively within that district. Not throughout the town, not across the street, in that district. In its current conception. The idea was, if this were to operate, that would be the most appropriate area for such operation. This is not specific to any one parcel. This is not because one resident said, I'm interested, that one resident can do it. This is for any property within that district. I would be remiss if I did not give you the same legal advice I gave planning and zoning as they, or the LPA, as they considered this issue. Some of the points of concern. One of the members inquired about, well, can't we always change this if we don't like it? What's the harm in starting, and if we don't like it, we change it? Said that's true, and as I tell my sister, who's a physician, my job is way easier because if I screw up, I just make amendments. But one issue you do have is this involves land use, and if you do give somebody one of the sticks in the bundle of rights, as we often refer to them in the property world, and you take that away, where you downzone that property, and somebody has made a reasonable investment-backed interest, they may pursue a Burt-Harris claim or other form of takings or claim. We've talked about that. I've talked about that extensively in the context of other ordinances. If you'd like a more exhaustive explanation of that, I'm happy to give it. But that is always a risk that if you get buyer's remorse in 5, 7, 10 years, yes, you preserve the power, but it may come at a cost to do so. Another concern was, well, realistically, we know what that area looks like. There's not really a whole lot of places where you can go. Again, I explained I understand that. I also wanted to make clear that this is for the area. A lot of the conversation often went back to what we had. As we've seen, whether it's part of a global trend or otherwise, Florida in the last few years has had very intense storm systems come through and do a great deal of damage to communities, and communities have been put in the position unexpectedly of rebuilding areas they thought long established. It is possible that if this community found itself in that position, and this was a permitted right, as with any permitted right in that district, that could be done. And that might be more feasible in the wake of a storm event or something where more land is leveled and people can start over and maybe reevaluate what the highest and best use is for their purposes as a private property owner. There's, of course, the tension, as with anything, of the regulation of, well, it's private property, let people do what they want with their land, versus, is this how we want land to be used in our community? That's a policy decision for you folks to make, and that is in your capable hands. But that's the some of the issues that came up in the course of that discussion. More narrowly, looking at the language, a paid parking lot at present in this proposed ordinance is defined as, it's a little harder to read in the version I have, I'm sorry, is for the general public to pay for use of parking vehicles, and is designed to be consistent with another division of street parking and loading facilities as it's defined elsewhere in the code functionally. That's an abridged reading of that. And that they are a permitted use solely in the business district triangle overlay zone. I want to make that very clear. As drafted, that is the contemplation. We're not talking about R2. We're not talking about the north end of town. We're talking just in that district in its current form. That's what's been proposed. And so with that, Greg, do you have anything else you wish to add?
Yeah, I think I maybe will help clarify one thing I think you said
Please.
correctly earlier. The planning, the P&Z recommended denial of the approval.
Thank you.
I think you said
I was looking at the ayes and I forgot that motion made it. That was a motion to deny. Thank you very much.
But that you did a great job.
Yes, it was a motion to deny, and the body declined to. And it was interesting. There was some concern because the way this worked was they workshopped it, and they all said, "Yeah, let's see an ordinance. I'd love to see an ordinance." And there was some concern once the ordinance came. Well, am I bound by my recommendation to see an ordinance? No, you wanted to see it. Now you've seen it. Make your own decisions. And a lot of people, in thinking, a lot of the conversation was in the bigger picture, long-term concerns that gave some people pause, which ultimately led to the recommendation against. So there was only one member, who voted to move forward with this kind of use. The remainder of the remaining members voted against it. So my apologies, and thank you for clarifying the record, Manager Moose. That's the staff or the backing on this. If you have any questions, of course we're here at the ready. Otherwise, turn it to.
Does anyone have any questions for Randy?
So you're saying what we have here is wrong?
No,
Does it show
it shows ayes. What happened here was this is the rare instance where a motion was made in the negative, and this is why when we've had that
Okay.
in the past, I've kind of counseled against it. It makes for a confusing record. So it shows ayes, but the motion was a motion to deny or to recommend against
Okay.
approving, and so that the minutes, or rather the unapproved minutes are accurate. It was just confusing because it's in the inverse.
Does anyone else have any questions for Randy before we go out to public hearing? Bill?
Randy, real quick, the current status that we have on parking is that the lot itself has to be an accessory to a structure or a business, is that correct?
Yes, parking lots operate as an accessory, but that you cannot have a paid parking lot as an accessory or primary function.
Or
There's no
standalone.
paid parking. Well, if you have standalone parking and it's standalone parking at no charge, that's not really a use. You have a lot that you let people use.
That's different than if you're getting compensation for it.
Correct. This
Okay.
is about basically functionally the operation of a specific kind of commercial
All
enterprise.
right, so one further question. Given the fact that the unfortunate event would come through and raise the area, would that accessory to a structure still would be enforced, and somebody couldn't just decide to take their lot and open up a parking lot on it? They'd have to put a building on there first?
As proposed, is not being added as a permitted accessory use. The proposal here is a permitted use. It would be a permitted primary use were this ordinance to be passed.
Okay.
So were this ordinance, just so I'm clear on our understanding,
Right.
were this ordinance to be passed, and at some future date, portions of the business triangle district had more cleared land and things that we commonly associate with being there are not there, and somebody said, you know what, I don't think I need a townhome there anymore. I would rather take my 2 lots and make them a paid parking lot and fit in the 10 spaces and charge people, they'd be able to do that.
Okay.
As a primary use, not pertinent to anything else, not as part of my vacation rental, not as part of my pizza place, just I have a paid parking lot that I own land and that's how I use it.
Okay.
If this were to pass.
Randy, could there be some kind of an amendment that we could put into the ordinance to say that wouldn't be possible, or?
Well, in that case, as I understand it, then you probably wouldn't want that use. Either you allow the use or you don't. You don't say, we're allowing the use, but if the landscape changes unexpectedly, we don't really want to allow the use.
Okay.
To me, I think what you're recommending is that I have concerns about that. That may inform your decision-making tonight.
And did you have a question? I thought I had your, anyone else have a question before I
Well,
go to, okay.
I'm just wondering, so basically, us as a city are the only ones that own any property down there in a parking lot that has no other use, correct?
I don't know that I understand the question. I can
Okay,
tell
you're
you,
saying
I can
that
tell
all
you
these-
that an individual came before the body who owns property and
Right.
generally allows the public, in
Right.
their great benevolence,
Oh,
to park there without trespassing people or otherwise.
Right.
So I admittedly am not as intimately familiar with the landscape of your community, but if that's what you're thinking of, that exists, but they're not charging people for
No, I understand that. No,
Okay.
I know that the parking lot is part of their whole property,
Right.
which services 3-4 buildings.
it. Right.
I understand that, but what I'm saying, you're saying, if you just have a vacant lot, and you own a vacant lot down there, you can't use it as a parking lot, right?
Not if you're charging people for it.
Right, and we're the only ones down there that actually have a parking lot as a city down there that has no other.
We have parking spaces along the street. We have the 14 or 15 spaces on the Holiday Inn property that was part of that planned unit development, but that's just general public parking. We don't have meters or anything.
Right. But would we be able to, if the parking situation down there is terrible as it is, and I mean, there's people that work down there that are parking in the city parking places and all of that, and if it continued to get worse with everyone charging parking and everybody else parking, I mean, would the city be able to start charging
Yeah.
also? We can do that if we want to
Yeah.
right now, correct? Okay, all right, I understand.
Anyone else before I go to the public hearing? I'd like to open the public hearing at this time on this agenda item. And anyone who would like to come up at this time, please come forward, state your name, your address, and you will have 3 minutes to talk on this agenda item.
Todd Conley, 469 Harbor Drive North. I am the property owner that brought it up in front of the city. I will say I'm disappointed that the way that the vote went, everyone was giving me a thumbs up, hey, you've got it, even including in this meeting, before this meeting, city commissioners up here. So they were confused on the reading on just like you said, the way it was in the negative. And you even went as far as saying it's very rarely put in the negative and you don't recommend it putting in the negative. I'm curious if it was completely understood by everyone, because I was at those meetings.
At that meeting, I don't believe you were at the meeting where they actually considered the ordinance. You were at the meeting where it was workshopped, and admittedly, during the workshop meeting, it was addressed. At the meeting, there is a pause in the meeting where I make it explicitly clear, if you are voting yes, you are voting not to allow this use. So yes, it was made very clear to the members of the Planning and Zoning Board, and that was a product of the conversation. If you go through the minutes and the dialogue, it was an evolved position. As this body and other bodies have the opportunity to consider matters, they're not bound to their initial interest in the issue.
Understood. Yeah. No, yeah, but it must have evolved again until even misunderstanding tonight in the way it was read on this agenda for this evening. I'm just disappointed in that. I will say that the highest and best use of that property down there will never be a parking lot. So that concern about that in the future is a joke. That, I mean, the highest and best use is not. I happen to just already have businesses and relationships with Krabby's and everyone else down there, and I know it's needed, and it is what it is. Currently, it is a parking lot, so we were just trying to take care of some of that liability and some of those issues that we take on by allowing the city to use it as a parking lot and the public to use it as a parking lot. But the highest and best use would never be a parking lot. I'll build whatever there before we do that. So, you know, I guess at the end of the day, I'm disappointed, and there's not much else to say. It is if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, I mean, it's a duck. So it's concerned about future and potential bigger parking lots because it would be the highest and best use, I think, is not good enough. So I don't know how if we could do it. You did say, Randy, that maybe instead of doing it as we presented it, maybe it could be as an appeal to its accessory use, specifically for that lot, as opposed to a general change. Is that something maybe I should be going that direction and asking for a specific for that lot? Is that an avenue that maybe...
We're getting to the point where it's a little more Q&A and less comment. This is your opportunity to present comments, and I'm happy to address the inquiries of this body, but if you have comments, and I would just add, as this body considers ordinances, it's always considering them as general application, not with respect to an individual law.
Yeah, an ordinance definitely, that's why I wonder if we could tweak it to an appeal, like come back to the drawing table and change it to something other than changing ordinance.
I can't give you legal advice, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else who'd like to come up at this time and speak on this agenda item? Please come forward.
Kelly Cistrick, 448 Harbor Drive South. As long as the city is not contemplating putting public paid parking down in the business triangle, I think it's perfectly acceptable for a resident, for an applicant with private property to put parking down there. There are oftentimes a parking problem down there, and the applicant is providing a temporary solution to that problem, and I don't know what the ultimate outcome of that property will be, what will go there eventually, but the city knows that it has a parking problem down in the triangle, and this is going to retain some parking for you and will keep us from building an ugly parking garage or anything for a few more years. So I would support paid parking lots for private property down there and not public. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward on this agenda item?
Pat Plumley, and I own the property of 417 First Street. Next door to my property is a vacant lot, and that lot has nothing in it but people going to the beach and Krabby Bill's overflow, and anybody, I mean, Lulu's overflow, any of them, and we have not charged anybody anything. But I've paid the taxes on that lot, and I have paid the insurance on that lot, and I have the liability for that lot. And I just feel like if I could have somebody having some order, and this company does an order system that came to us with this proposal, they have somebody monitoring it, we wouldn't have the parking. They're parking every which way on my property. And aside from having them towed, which makes bad business, and I'm in the tourism business, and I want to be good neighbors, and I am a good neighbor to everybody. And I've been there for 22 years, letting everybody park in that empty lot. And I think it's time that somebody think about that empty lot is what I'm talking about. And I agree with what my son Todd said. That is not the highest and best use for that property. So if we were to sell it, it wouldn't be for a parking lot. It's just a normal sized lot that's vacant. We use it for all the community projects going on when they have the Taste of the Beaches and all the different projects. My son puts a sign up and says, welcome, park here, overflow. You know, everybody parks there and everybody uses it. But we just think it's time that we cover our taxes and our insurance and our liability for this darn empty lot. I can't see the harm in it, I really can't. I'm not talking about parking on we have a lot of parking for our employees and everything else, but I'm talking about this vacant lot is why we brought this to everybody's attention to begin with. And we did talk to Matt Loader, because we don't want bad friends, and he said, go for it. He said, if I have overflow customers, they'll be glad to go to the parking meter. So I just think that I'm really addressing the empty lot.
Thank you, Pat. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward at this time? Okay.
I'm Patty Mungo, and I must admit that I am the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Board, and I was present at that meeting. We discussed it for over an hour, and for our committee to discuss something over an hour, we looked at everything. And basically, when the proposal was made, we were kind of odd that the person that proposed it had said he denied it, you know. And that was when the question came up, and we made sure that we all knew what we were talking about. First of all, you have to remember that we're talking about paid parking and only in the Triangle Center. When we have festivals, churches in this city have paid parking at their churches. Granted, they say donations, but they don't allow you to park unless you pay. And it's not in the Triangle, number one. We also, because of what Randy had told us, we looked at the fact that because of the way the ordinance was written, that we had a concern that the property could, i.e. the big vacant parking lot over there where the Holiday Inn is, they could build a building structure. There is nothing saying they can't build a 3-story structure parking lot over there. I know it's one small area that we're looking at right now, but we looked future, down the road. We didn't look at just right now what's going on in the city. So that's why we all agreed that it was not the proper thing to do at this point for looking at the future of the city. And I think that the people in charge of zoning needs to look at things and maybe talk to the churches that charge for parking as donations. It is not legal, I don't think. I may be wrong. They can say it's a donation, but if it's a donation, it means you don't have to pay. And they make you pay. So I just want everyone to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Is there anyone else who'd like to come up at this time to speak on this agenda item? Okay. Eric?
Good evening, Eric Meyer, 2316 Gulf Boulevard. Maybe as they resolve, and I listened to what Patty said, maybe something in the temporary use per event or a monthly thing. That's just a suggestion. So there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I close the public hearing, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this agenda item? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion from the commission to deny or accept?
Motion to approve the ordinance as written.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Would you like to make a
Yes.
comment on your motion?
Yes,
Vice Mayor?
so obviously I'm recommending the opposite of what the Planning and Zoning Board put out. It was brought to our attention in this meeting that perhaps there could be a parking structure built on the vacant lot near the Holiday Inn. That might not be a bad thing for the city. We have a terrible parking problem. If we expect investments to be made in infrastructure to support our needs, one must expect that there be some financial reward for the entrepreneurs and owners who are taking those risks and putting that capital in place to offer a service and a solution for our visitors and our residents. It's common sense. To do nothing will only perpetuate the problem which plagues our city, clogs our streets, and pollutes our air because people drive endlessly in circles looking for parking, stopping anywhere they believe there may be a spare spot as they glance up and down the street looking for a place to sandwich their car where it doesn't belong. So yes, I feel passionately about this. I think it's a good idea. I am of a different opinion than the board, and I would hope that we can debate this tonight and come to a satisfactory resolution and let this be a permitted use in the business district triangle, which is a very well-defined area of our city that has an extremely difficult parking situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Robel?
I agree. The parking structure, and I know the USF study has come up a lot lately. And if you look at the USF study, there's a parking garage in Chickasee Park. So somebody wanted one back then and it never went forward. But I also agree that Holiday Inn would be a great place for a parking garage. We need it down there. I brought this up a while back about how I was down there and there were people that were going to work in places that had parking lots with no cars in them, and they were parking in the city parking lot. I saw employees from the Holiday Inn parking in the public parking on the streets. So we definitely have a problem down there. I have no problem with paid parking. I think we do need to do something drastic down there about parking, because we keep doing everything we can to attract more and more people down here, and that is the business district where everybody wants to go. We need to do something, and this could be a start to a parking garage, or the city, you know, doing something about the businesses not utilizing their parking lots for their employees and utilizing our public parking that we're trying to get people to come to and use. That's all I'm for.
Thank you, Commissioner Robel. Would either of you like to chime in?
Please, and I think Patty brought up one of the points is parking at special events around the city. We do see a lot of that in donations. Is that something that we address somewhere else in our ordinances? I mean, I'm not saying churches, I'm just saying we have a lot of events around the city, Beach Fest and everything else. There's a lot of places that are charging for parking. You know, is that something we're going to look at, John?
Just as a point, that I would love to put that as a work session item. I don't think it's addressed in this very narrow ordinance, but this motion which we're discussing is to permit paid parking in the business district triangle, and the only church there is the Loading Dock. Sorry, that was a bad joke.
Okay, that's
There's no church.
Sorry, you get your Bloody Mary.
So the next question is do we have any exceptions for this? So during those events like, you know, Beach Fest or Taste of IRB, are we going to ask these businesses to open those up, or are we not, because these are, you know, places we'd like to bring people into Indian Rocks Beach to enjoy our city outside of those, you know, those normal beach days. So something that's not addressed narrowly in here, but something that I think is important for us to consider, as we have a lot of events down in that area around the city. And just to add on to the whole parking thing, I have no problem with paid parking in that area. You know, employees are going to park wherever they find a spot, no matter what businesses they're in, whether it's in somebody's lot or not. But I think paid parking is something we should address in another session throughout the city. Absolutely.
Commissioner Anna?
Well, I agree with the direction. First of all, very familiar with the situation. I knew this before anybody else on the commission did. It's probably not because I'm a real estate agent, but it's another story. Of course, I'm saying that tongue in cheek. The paid parking is, if it's your business and your lot, and you have an opportunity to make some money off of it, fine. That doesn't mean people are going to park there, because human nature is, I'm going to drive around and see if I can find a free spot first. It's going to take care of itself. But the fact of the matter is that you do have ongoing expenses, and you've been generous through the years. My only concern was, Randy, when I went back to talk about if things were leveled, I know what you're talking about in your business, but if there were little homes down there that all of a sudden the guy says, I decide I'm not going to rebuild that little home on the water, I'm just going to go ahead and make a parking lot out of it. The city makes no revenue off this. It's just a function, but the situation that the Triangle does need parking, and that it's your personal property, and if it's an opportunity to help you recover some costs, I don't have a problem with it.
And I'd just like to clarify, I gave the example of townhomes. I understand this is your business district. Insert property here in the event that's misconstrued.
Bill?
May I, okay, so you brought that up about knocking down the business and that. Say a business owner down there bought a bunch of property around their business, and they started knocking down everything around it. Could they start charging for this lot over here or this lot over here that is part of?
It would be a permitted use outright on property in the business district triangle. If you own property, highest and best use or otherwise, and I perhaps shouldn't have used that term because I understand it's a term of art, but if for whatever reason you think it is in your personal best interest or the least path of least resistance to generating revenue, if you own property and choose to use it in that way, you would be allowed to as a matter of right. You don't have to come get special permission from us, from this body. There's no special license variance, etc. Now, if you opt to construct things in a way that might require that, then you would. But I only say that because this question came up. So, well, won't they have to come back to the city for approval? No, this is permitted as of right. I'm going to open a t-shirt shop. I'm going to open a parking. Your choice.
All right, I understand.
One other point, relative to if it were a restaurant, I have to have so much parking for so many seats that I have, how would that be affected by this?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
That's what we'll get into if this is passed, is if a business owner wants to convert some of their parking lot into a paid parking lot, we're gonna do the math on what they're required to have, and they would not be allowed to use the required amount of parking spaces to do this paid parking. That's going to be subtracted out of that. The Plumlee lot's different because, yeah, it's an empty lot. That's a whole different situation. But I've had a couple other businesses inquire, because it's been talked about for a while, about, well, you know, maybe want to take half of my spaces. Well, that probably is not going to work, because we're going to sit down before you do that and do the math of how many you're supposed to have for your restaurant or whatever it is. And then if you got extra, that's fine, but most don't have extra. They only have what they're supposed to have.
Okay. I thought that was a point that needed to be addressed. So.
Just in the case of a business owner who may be considering something like that, the enforcement of the types of segmentations of the parking is really difficult. In this case that we're talking about here, they're outsourcing the management of the parking facility to a third party who specializes in the enforcement and collection of the money associated with the parking lot. Again, this is only for the business triangle. If we think about what's down there and how it may change over time, paid parking, in my opinion, is a good thing in that area if it opens up additional spots for visitors to come, pay to park their car, and then come and spend money in our city. And I think it's a good thing.
I just want to add that I had a discussion with Randy, the fact that I own property in the Triangle, I have a business there, I'm an entrepreneur, and I live there, and so I wanted to put into the record that I did have a discussion with Randy as far as voting, and it was ethically okay, and it is okay. So I just want to put in the record that we did have a conversation concerning this issue. And with that, I'm going to, if we're finished with the conversation, Randy, would you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. There's a motion and a second. One second, I'm logging the original motions in a second. Okay, Commissioner Hanna?
Yes.
Commissioner Hoofnagel? Commissioner Palumbo?
Yes.
Commissioner Robel?
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy?
Yes.
This is passed unanimously, 5-0 on first reading. Second reading will be at a future meeting.
Thank you, and we will move on now to ordinance number 2019-02. Public hearing, it's a first reading, and Randy, would you read this agenda item by title only?
Yes, Madam Mayor, this is first reading of ordinance number 2019-02, an ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, amending section 106-44 and 106-44 of the Land Development Code concerning removal of dead or diseased trees, providing for enforcement, making related findings, providing for codification, severability, and an effective date. This has been a first reading of ordinance number 2019-02 by title only. Again, I'll take lead on this one. This issue came up because there was a legal issue which arose in the community that was predicated on the enforcement of, or at least requested enforcement of this provision. And in reviewing the provision, I found that as drafted, it was overbroad. What happened in this section is it said it had provisions governing the removal of certain trees within the community. And then in another section, it made a list of enumerated species. And then in another section, it said exceptions. And in that exceptions section, it suggested that those species were accepted from the entire article, not just this section, but everything having to do with the tree regulation. I don't know if that was the spirit of the law. I doubt it, but as it read, it created one little donut hole, if you will, of enforcement relative to a few species of trees, which creates other issues. And so this sought to remedy them. In addressing that same issue, I found that there were some issues in the processes and systems in clarifying how is the city going to address the issue if presented with claims or concerns about dead or diseased trees. I want to be very clear. This governs the removal of dead or diseased trees, which is something that, per this ordinance, as it would require the city getting an arborist to make that determination with reference to certain standards where applicable. To make that determination so the city's not placed in a situation where it's having a battle of the experts and who's going to pay more to get the opinion they want. This is not a common issue. This is not a day-to-day common issue. But what it does do is it allows it sets forth the process for removing dead or diseased trees. I keep saying that because what this doesn't address is damaged trees. My neighbor's tree is ugly. My neighbor's tree is not watered enough, and this needs to be removed. This is not about that. This is about dead or diseased trees. To the extent it references Florida Department of Agriculture regulations on certain species, what it does is it makes those species of trees impermissible to sell or plant all on a going forward basis. This is not, hey, I know where a China berry exists, city, you need to come out and remove it. There's plenty of case law on the takings element of that, and that's not the least restrictive or least invasive course of action by a city or by a government entity. And so this is not about finding, here's a set of, excuse me, in this case 8 species, and we're going to eradicate them from the community. That's not what this is about. And this is about dead or diseased trees, and in another section, I think it captures what the original language was trying to accomplish, but in its overbroad language, I think muddled. So this was it was one of those situations I've told you in the past when we get under the hood, we try to look at everything, so we're not doing 3 and 4 amendments to the same ordinance throughout a year as we find issue by issue. So this was to cure those 2 issues. Issue 1, how do we handle the species that Florida Department of Agriculture has described as invasive or otherwise, with reference to those guidelines. Issue 2, what's the protocol for the removal of dead or diseased, not damaged, dead or diseased trees, and how will that work, and making it clear that it is that the city will give you notice, it is a violation not to remove it, however, the city reserves the right to remove it so on and so forth. I think the language speaks for itself. I'm happy to have, answer any questions, of course, you may have. It's not that complex of an ordinance in terms of what we've considered, but that's what's going on. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So I didn't read anywhere when we say we're gonna have an arborist look at it and potentially remove it, who pays for that? Is that at the city's cost at that point?
At that point, yes.
Will the city be able to recoup that investment?
What happens in that kind of situation is like overgrown lots, we file a lien against the property and it would go on their taxes, and eventually, in theory, we would get our money back.
So hypothetically, if the lots down in the north end that are empty, if a tree was in there and we deemed it when they sell it.
Yeah.
We would pursue that.
I just didn't see that enumerated anywhere, so I just wonder if we need to be clear about that somewhere.
There is, excuse me.
Yes,
In the event the city must remove a dead or diseased tree at its expense, the actual documented cost of the removal shall be assessed against the owner. I think that's very clear. I'm not positive that you will be able to recover the cost of retaining the arborist, though the city may pursue that. And I would leave it at that at this time.
Anyone else have any questions for Randy before we go to the public comment?
But I would like to just emphasize something that, a point that Randy made. Sometimes we take conversations about ordinances and turn them into large things. This is really not a large thing. We had, in the 5 years I've been here, we've had 2 properties where we've had concerns about trees, and we have one not too long ago that would involve a pretty high dollar amount to deal with it. And this is where we ran into the concerns about how the ordinance is worded. So just keep that in mind. This is not a daily thing, or this is a once in a 2 or 3. And as we've worked with y'all on the other land code or code provisions, this is just a cleanup that needs to happen to make sure that we don't have any legal issues with somebody if we have to do something.
Okay.
This is strictly diseased or dead trees. It has nothing to do with neighbors. Like, I think your tree's on my side, it's on his side, it's by my house.
No, and I
Okay.
appreciate you asking that. I would just make it clear that to the extent you're having private property issues with a neighbor, that is a private property issue for 2 citizens to resolve themselves either as civilized human beings or in the civil process of the courts. That's not really the city's role.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, the public comment period. Is there anyone who would like to come forward, state your name and your address at this time on this agenda item?
Kelly Sister, 448 Harbor Drive South. Other counties have more aggressive invasive species rules to cause owners to not allow some of these exact species to proliferate on their lots, because I've done battle with Brazilian pepper and carrot wood before, because they spread to neighboring lots. Now we have mostly developed lots, but we still have some problems. I've had carrot woods pop up in my yard, and they come out of nowhere and they get tall and they start dropping berries on the other side. So I'd like to see the city go further. If it's going to amend a tree ordinance, I'd like to see them give some power to eradicating these species when they pop up to cause owners to remove them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this time? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public comment, and I'm looking for a motion to either approve or deny. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion on 2019-02?
Motion to approve 2019-02.
Second.
Would you like to comment on your motion, Maker?
No, I think pretty much what we've talked about. I've had just a couple questions. I was concerned about cost to the city, and I think as Greg stated, the fact that this is not dramatically changing, this is cleaning up something is, I think, great for our code overall as we continue to go through and clean up a lot of things.
And one thing I think I need to clarify too is that the remedy of hiring an arborist in the city going on property and removing trees. One of the things this also does, and this is part of the problem we ran into in a situation that we have, we also can go the route of giving a notice and citing somebody for a code violation, and we go to county court. So that's something that was not clear we had before, but that's also part of this. It's in 106-45. This is, I think it's 5, but it gives us, so we've got a couple different ways to handle it. Point of making it's just not long. We can cite every day if we need to. And I think we didn't have that ability before.
And to that same end, you know, to just hammer home even further, as Greg said, this is the city getting involved in this kinds of thing, to the point that it's actually going on private property and destroying the plan, if you will. There's Florida Supreme Court case law dating as far back as 1957 on a similar issue, saying the absolute destruction of property is an extreme exercise of police power and is justified only within the narrowest limits of actual necessity. And that's why we talk about debt or disease. It's actual necessity. It's public health and safety are an issue, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay, anyone else? Any comments?
I like what Kelly brings up. That would be fantastic if we could do that, but I'm wondering how could you police something like that? Because I have neighbors that just let the pepper trees go crazy. And I mean, I just don't think it's policeable, unfortunately, unless we eradicate them from the city completely, which would be wonderful. But
see previous citation.
Yeah. Or that would be a good grant for someone to look for.
So we have as the banker,
We could use a grant for
Commissioner
private
Palumbo,
property, too.
and then we have a second by Commissioner Hanna. Randy, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Hanna?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hufnagel?
Yes.
Commissioner Palumbo?
Yes.
Commissioner Robel?
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy?
Yes.
Passes unanimously, Mayor, on first reading.
Thank you, sir. 7A, Legislative Matters, Ordinance Number 2019-03, first reading. Randy, would you read the ordinance by title?
Happily, Mayor. City of Indian Rocks Beach, Ordinance Number 2019-03, an ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, amending the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 15, Schedule of Fees, Article 5, Libraries, Section 15-41, borrowing periods, fines for late return of material, audio, CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray, by Section 15-42, fees for replacement of damaged or missing materials, by Section 15-43, miscellaneous library fees and charges, by providing for an adjustment to the library services fee schedule, providing for severability, providing for the repeal of ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, to the extent of such conflict, and providing for an effective date. This has been a reading of ordinance number 2019-03 by title only.
Greg, I'm going to have you present.
Yes, Greg, this will be the most exciting ordinance that you talked about tonight. One of the things that the library brought to my attention a couple of months ago was some confusion. It was not written clearly about, for example, with things that are checked out of the library when they're brought back late, how much the fee is. This clarifies that. The other thing that she realized and brought to my attention is that computers are a pretty large part of the library in the state and time, and we had a code provision in the books that if you went in the library to use a computer, you paid a $2 fee. I asked her to look into that, and the result of that was we couldn't find another library in Dallas County or Hillsborough County to charge a $2 fee. So that's the other part of that, is it eliminates the fee, where if you want to go use a computer, you sit down and you use it. And then the only other thing in section 15-42 just specifies that if you lose something, or by the way this was written, if it gets wet, chewed, like the old thing about dog chew up the homework, if you let your dog chew up our library book, then this clarifies that you'll just pay the price of whatever that item is listed in the library database. But the biggest thing that brought this on was we realized that we had this fee for computer usage, and there was just no reason to have it. So it's just some housekeeping matters, really all this is.
Okay, is there anyone who has any questions for either Randy or Greg on this issue?
Is it
Vice
just
Mayor?
database, it's just a typo, when we approve it, we could change based to base in subsection 1, 2, and 3, 15-42.
That's a new kind of database, it's based.
Any questions from the commission before we go to public comment? Is there anyone who would like to speak on this agenda item at this time?
I'm sorry to be a microphone hog tonight. I've had this library card since 1993. I've paid exactly $10 in official fees to the library since 1993. I think it's time that we could charge people like an annual fee or something. I'd be glad to pay the library $20 a year to use their services. I went in there last year when my mom was staying with me for an extended period of time, and they ordered 2 books for me for free. I mean, I give them books from time to time, you know, for them to sell to raise money, but really, the library should be a little bit more self-supporting. 10 cents a day for a late fee is a joke. I could just leave a book, you know, for the summer and come back and pay the late fee. It's so cheap, it doesn't give me any motivation to return the book on time. So if you raise it to 50 cents, I mean, hey, I'm not a late book returner, but if you raise it to 50 cents or something, you know, more reasonable might motivate people to bring their books back on time. So I would just try to, you know, apply some fees to the people who actually use the services and not have the whole city have to carry the burden of the library for people who don't use it. So, thank you.
Kelly, when I work on the budget next year, I'll put in a provision for Kelly fees for the library.
And we have got new cars, they're actually technology specific.
Well, I like my old fashioned.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this agenda item? Please come forward. I'm going to close the public comment. I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to approve 2019-03, subject to amending 15-42, paragraph 1, 2, and 3, replacing the word based with the word base.
Second.
Any comments from the maker or the second?
No, I mean, I spent time in the library recently, denoted by my new card, and the librarian's done an awesome job in there. As a matter of fact, the community's donated so many books, they can't take more in right now because they're still trying to process those, and the support that she's gotten from the community and what they do for the community is, I would tend to agree that this is on the inexpensive side for a fine, but we can start here.
You can always make a donation to the Friends of the Library. It's a great organization and helps to support
Yes, it is.
and offset the ancillary costs of the public asset that we have here. So,
Commissioner
that's the
Brumbill, did you
Where
have
did
something?
I mean, how did we come up with these fees? Do we know what other libraries
Yeah,
cost?
those are comparable to all the libraries in the area.
Anything else? Randy, we have the maker is Vice Mayor.
I have it,
You
Mayor,
have it,
thank you.
okay, and would you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Bufingo,
yes.
Commissioner Palumbo,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanna,
Yes.
Commissioner Robel,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Yes.
Again, passes unanimously, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Agenda item 8A is our work session item for discussion only and on term limits. And I would like, since this was, you brought this to our attention, Commissioner Robel, I'd like you to lead off tonight, present.
Okay. In our packet, it does show where Clearwater Dunedin has 4-year terms. Kennett City, Mayor, 2 3-year terms. Commission, 3 2-year terms. Oldsmar, 2 3-year terms. Pasadena, 2 4-year terms. St. Pete, 2 4-year terms. Tarpon Springs, 2 3-year terms. I just think it's something that we should do in our city. I think it would attract more people to run. And also, our IRB term limit of 6 years applies to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals in our city. Why should we have it on just that board and not to the commission? I think it's something we should ask Randy to write up. We should come to a decision tonight on how many years you would like to do this, and I'll leave it at that.
Randy, I'm going to have you kind of give us some of the legal parts of this and some of the questions that I asked you before the commission too.
The legal advice on this is a little amorphous. I'll start off by saying this is a policy decision. This is not a legal decision. The decision to be made is policy. That's for you folks should you move forward, ultimately the electorate. I will at no point weigh in on the wisdom of this decision. That is not my job. As far as the legal side, I can tell you to the extent this is memorialized anywhere in any of these communities, it is always in the charter. I strongly suggest, were this to be pursued, it would be in the form of a charter amendment where you would allow your residents the opportunity to decide if this is how they want their legislative body, this commission, to function. So if you choose to move forward with a referendum item, or with an amendment, I strongly urge that it be done via charter amendment, which, as all of you are familiar at this point, would require a vote of your electorate. It is not unprecedented. I think there are also different permutations for how this works. As you saw, there are different communities, some small, mostly large, that have this. Some make it a hard and fast 2 and you're done, or 3 and you're done. Some say it's 2 and you can sit out 1 and come back, but if you choose to go to 3, then you're out for good. And so you see people who will serve, let's say if they're 2 4-year terms, they'll serve their 8 years, sit out for a little while, come back. So I say that to say, if your questions are, well, how would this work? Most of those will be answered with, how do you want it to work? How would it affect the 5 of you sitting here to the extent you've served 2 years? Well, that's a decision you would make, because if that's something you want addressed, which I would suggest you address a lot of the questions you have so it's clear and you don't leave your poor city attorney later interpreting what you meant, have it say, those serving on the effective date shall, be entitled to 2 more terms, shall be held based on the terms they've already served, with the exclusion of the term they're in, however you choose to do that. Similarly, I would also suggest that because this would be a transition point in your community, you address, would this handle, nothing in this provision shall be construed to prevent a turned out commissioner from separately running for mayor. Because if the mayor is a mayor commissioner, so do you want that position treated differently? So say so. Those are decisions you would have to make. There is to the extent people are familiar with this on the statewide level, in November of '92, almost 77% of Florida voters backed an amendment for term limits for the state legislature. In 1995, the Supreme Court ruled that states could not enact congressional term limits, meaning Florida can't say its commissioners, its Congress people only serve 2 terms, but Texas is surveyed. That would be too disparate, but you can regulate those in your own state. So in Florida, House members may be elected for up to 4 terms, a total of 8 years, while state senators can be elected for up to 2 terms, 8 years. The way that language reads is it's about serving in the same office. So if you have the fortunate position of being in an area that is redrawn, and you were termed out as the congressional member of district, or rather the state senator, for example, District 19, and then District 19 later becomes District 16, you may be able to run again. So to those of you familiar with some state legislative officials who might have been termed out and run again, that's usually how that's worked. Again, a lot of this really comes down to political will, which is, I won't say above my pay grade, but beyond what I care to do. And so that's really what you folks decide. If you have questions about what this means, how this works, I'm happy to answer that. As a primer, as you recall, we've done a few charter amendments recently, some involving the sewage, et cetera. We would vote on what the ballot language would look like, how that would read, which I know has been a hot button issue in the past in different communities on other issues. That doesn't mean that, and there are word limits about how long they can be, and that would be something I would strongly urge again that you let your attorney handle. But beyond that, then we would separately craft what the actual long-form charter provision would look like if you chose to move in this direction. I'm speaking in the affirmative to explain what the process would be. I'm not presupposing what conclusion you would reach. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. But again, a lot of this comes down to, what do you guys think?
And if I may, I apologize. I realize that this is a charter. It would not come onto the ballot until 2020, correct?
I think, yeah, in all likelihood, that would be the likely election cycle. But again, if you were to move forward, there's nothing This is not in response to anything, whereas I know in several times in the short-term rental situation, I said, you need to make a decision and now, because who knows what will happen. This is something that's come up, grassroots or otherwise, or top down from this. There's no posture as to artificial, or rather objective urgency. That's really a decision for you.
So could we bring something up and have it on this year's election and to take effect next year?
I think it would, not for March.
Okay, I didn't think so. I didn't think so, but the way you said
No, I would want more time
okay.
to do that.
All right.
Absolutely not.
I understand.
think that very definitely.
Does the commission have any questions for Randy, or would you like to go out to the public comment? Would you like to go out to the public comment? Or?
Sure.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to open the public comment on the issue of term limits. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and your address and come forward.
My name is Bill Thomas. I live at 470 20th Avenue in IRB. This referendum I have some concerns about because once I start looking at the term limits, I think it directly impacts some of the people on the commission. And when I looked at the ethics of conflict of interest, it goes to saying that you should not be voting or involved in anything that has anything to do with your personal financial compensation. And I believe that each commissioner is paid by the city. So I'm really concerned about how this is going to be handled and to make sure that it's an even playing field and people that are intimately involved in this that may have immediate impact or something would recluse themselves because there's a conflict of interest. And I'd like to see that, making sure that the commission is equally and has no any other influence on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Maria Schmack, from Hacienda. I feel all the cities that you have mentioned, like Clearwater and Sanpete, they are much larger cities with a lot more residents. In Indian Rocks Beach, we have less than 5,000 residents. And I don't know how,
Maria, will you speak in the mic for me?
I don't know how is that going to affect our little beach town, and we hardly have residents that they do want to run and be in the office. Me personally, I'm not in favor of the limitation. Thank you.
And as a general matter, if you could just please address your comments to the body as a whole.
Hi, my name is Dr. Steve Morris. I'm at 919 Harbor House Drive. I am also against the establishment of a referendum for term limits for a number of different reasons. Marie touched on some, but I don't want anybody taking my rights away. If I think someone's doing a good job, I want to vote for them. If someone's not doing a good job, I will vote against them. I don't want that privilege taken from me, and term limits would take that privilege from me. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this agenda item? Please come forward at this time.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Jim Lavity. I live at 316 10th Avenue. I've been thinking about this ever since it was brought up the other day, was given to me. I'm more, in this little town, I'm more involved and or concerned about quality, not quantity. And I mean that by the fine people that we have here who decide to run and give of their time. That's a real, genuine jewel for this town. And I would hate to see those people who are committed to doing that be put down out of office because of somebody thinks, oh, he's been in here too long. So I say quality is the top issue, and I think if you start making term limits, and people have to leave that are doing a good job in a small community, I think we lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward at this time?
I'm Patty Moneo, I live at 309 Bahia Vista Drive. I agree, I think that when we live in such a small town, it's always, could be a hard thing to get the quality that we need to be able to sit up here, and do the job. And I think that to put term limits on, it can be detrimental to the city. I think that I've lived here approximately 20 years now in this area, and I have seen, 3 mayors come through, and I think that people that sit in those seats, no matter which, if they're on the commission or they're in a special committee, they know when it's time to leave, whatever's going on. And I think we need to let it up to the person that's in that position to decide what to do, not us. And if you're running for office, like I say, and like the other gentleman said, if we think you're not doing a good job, we'll vote you out and we'll get somebody else, but leave it up that way.
Thank you, Patty.
Kelly Cistrick. Voter referendums are the truest form of democratic expression. I think this would be one of the most honorable items you could ever put up for a referendum vote. I wouldn't ask the 5 of you to decide it. I would ask that you let the voters decide it. We're lucky in our city to have enough involved citizens to run for election, and we rarely have uncontested elections. Installing term limits in our charter will encourage more people to run for election, and we will get more varied opinions and perhaps some fresh new faces on our commission. I want to thank Commissioner Rovell for pressing to get this issue on the agenda. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time?
John Fansfield, 448 Harvard Drive South. First, Phil, I wasn't talking about you. It wasn't about you. It was checks and balances. So getting back to this, it's true you can always vote somebody out, but when you make that argument, you're saying that the value of incumbency doesn't exist, and we know that's not true. Quality, we've got a lot of people of high quality. When we took a look at the people that were going for the P&Z board and for the finance board, I was just amazed about the quality of people that were running for that. So I don't think we're going to have a shortage of quality of people. I see both pros and cons on this, but I think it's best to let the voters decide. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come up at this time and speak on this issue?
Good evening, my name is Earl Weston, 671 Garland Circle, Indian Rocks Beach. We have 3,100 voters in the city. 2,000 of them voted for the commissioners last election, 1,500 of them voted for the mayors. So we have a pretty active electorate. Personally, I concur with the doctor, I believe he's a doctor, that said we would be disenfranchised by term limits, because if we want to vote for an elected official that we approve of, we should have the right to do that. Conversely, if we want to vote against an elected official we don't approve of, we should have the right to do that and not have an arbitrary imposed law that tells us who we can vote for or not vote for. Secondly, I think that in a small town like this, continuity is important. I've seen it reflected in former officials that have the knowledge of the history of this city. And that comes to help the nonprofits in many of their activities. And I'd like to see that continuity continue. Therefore, I would oppose term limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this issue? Thanks, Bert.
You didn't hear it, but I told you as I came up. Okay, Bert Valerie, 447 18th Avenue. Phil, I appreciate you bringing this up. This was something that I brought up when I was a commissioner. I didn't get any support from the board, and it never happened. But anyway, my feeling on this is that it's not a matter of getting rid of bad seeds that we have as commissioners. We've had wonderful commissioners. I think it's more about the 5,000 people we have living in our city who are quality people. And I don't mean anything against RV or Cookie, but I place that as an example. We had RV for quite a while. He did a really good job. I think there are other candidates that could have stepped forward and tried to run for mayor or tried to run for a commissioner, but it's so hard to beat an incumbent. So many of us just say, you know, especially if you haven't run before and you haven't been on the board, you know, you're just not even going to bother trying because they're the incumbent. And, you know, now RB has left and we have Cookie in, and wonderful job. She's doing a terrific job. And, but maybe she could have been in there a couple of years earlier had we had some sort of a system of doing this. So I don't think it's about replacing the other people, it's about giving the rest of our citizens the opportunity to come forward and having a lot of new ideas, new blood. I mean, Cookie's already come up with a whole bunch of good new ideas. So I'm looking at it in terms of, you know, getting more people involved in our city rather than the same old people all the time and having these long periods. Now, the other thing is you guys can come up with formulas that will work. So, I mean, let's just, again, Phil's been here for, I don't know, 10 years. Let's just say you limit it to 3 2-year terms. And then Phil would step down. You could have a race if the person really wanted to, they could come back and run again. I mean, you can do things that, you know, allow these guys that really are doing a good job and want to come back. Don't get rid of them, just say step down for a short time and you let them back in. Okay, thank you. By the way, you're the attorney. Is that a fact that has to be done that way? The populace doing it, the board can't?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It is on our charter, it's in our charter.
So it's in the charter, it has to be done that way?
Yes,
It's actually not in the
there's
charter.
nothing in the charter addressing term limits because it doesn't exist at present.
Okay, because it said in our.
So you guys could come up with the regulation?
No, we couldn't.
No, it's been the advice of legal that that would be a charter amendment.
Okay, so it's-
because that controls and governs
Good, good, good. Okay,
the
thank you.
operation.
Anyone else who'd like to come forward on this issue, please come forward at this time.
Eric Meyer, 2316 Gulf Boulevard. We're a small town community. I don't think we need to have term limits. There are a lot of small towns out there, such as, I'll read a few, Bel Air, Gulfport, Indian Shores, Largo, Madeira Beach, North Reddington, Pinellas Park, Safety Harbor, Seminole, St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, name a few, that don't have term limits. They are a small town community. I oppose having term limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward at this time to speak on this agenda item? One, two. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment, and I am looking for conversation from the commission. Is there anyone who'd like to start?
Phil, what was on your mind when you brought this up?
Just, I mean, it's been talked about before, and as Bert said, there's been, you know, there's a lot of people that do not want to put their name in it because there's so many, the people have been on there so long, they figure there's no way, you know, they're going to win. I think it would get more people involved in the community, more people, you know, step up and run.
We've had contested elections pretty much every year, right? So it doesn't seem to
And
be
this
a
would probably
shortage of
bring more, I think
people
it'd
running.
bring more people out. I think it would bring more people out. More people that are sitting on the sidelines saying, maybe I should, then they see someone throw their name in and they'll think, oh, well, either the incumbent's gonna win, or why bother, or I'll take votes away from that person. So, I mean, I think it's something, I mean, let the residents, let the voters decide. You know, that's how I'm putting it. Let's see what the voters think.
Would any of you like to speak?
Well, just one point of clarity is 7 of the 24 polling cities in Pinellas County that we hold have term limits, and I think as somebody said, it's mainly the large cities, and I think part of that is just amount of people, right? You know, there was also some interesting things when you start digging into that. In some of those cities, they run by sections of town as well, so there's other caveats in there that it's a very complex issue to figure out.
Right, right. Like Safety Harbor has, I think, 5 districts.
Very.
Yeah. So.
I'll take the 15,000, Dunedin has 36,000, Kenneth City has 5,100, Oldsmar 14,000, South Pasadena has 5,118, St. Petersburg has 263,000 and change, Tarpon Springs 25,000. There is not one city in this county that has under 5,000 people that has term limits. The cities that do have term limits, they have either 3-year terms or 4-year terms. As most of you know, in Indian Rocks Beach, we have a 2-year term. I received several emails, because emails that were sent out to people and wanted an opinion on it. And I will just briefly read to you one email that I sent back. Small cities don't have a big pool of individuals. If someone says they do, they're wrong. I've been around for 13 years. Also, because we have only 2-year terms in IRB, the opportunity to remove a person who may be a problem from office is easier compared to the terms that are in for 3 or 4 years that the cities of Pinellas County that are term limited have at this time. In 2008, an entire group was removed from office in IRB due to negligence of city finances. I am telling you the absolute truth. The state paid IRB a visit. It isn't, I am telling, you keep your mouth shut while I'm talking, because what I'm telling is the truth tonight, okay?
No.
The state paid IRB a visit to look into our financial situation. There was a group of us that were put into office, and when the state came in, they told us that we would be red flagged for the next 2 years if we didn't change the financial situation that was in Indian Rocks Beach. The point of this message is that the residents came forward and they voted out the issues with the citizens that they felt were not in their best interest. And in that respect, term limits were the voters. I don't really have a problem with term limits per se. If the rest of the commission would want them, but I think that there is a truth here, and I think the truth needs to be said. One of the comments that was brought up was that the Board of Adjustments has a 6-year term limit. We had a problem with that when we realized that we do have a term limit on that board, and we actually had to put a waiver in place because there was no one who wanted at that time to be on the board, so that a member who was on the board could have the opportunity to be put back on the board who had already served 6 years. At this moment in time, we have 2 openings on boards. And we were thrilled at the amount of people who wanted to come and participate on the Planning and Zoning Board in our last openings. But like I said, we still have 2 positions that are open that we have not been able to fill. I don't know if there's any other comments that you want to make concerning this, Ed?
I think when you run for office, you put yourself out, and it's not an easy decision. I understand Bill's point about incumbency, but you know, every 2 years you have to ask yourself about the civic duty that you feel is calling you to volunteer to do this job. There's a stipend that's paid, but boy, if that's covering the effort at all, let's just not go there. I'm confident to say that there's no conflict of interest financially that would arise from discussing this topic of any meaningful amount. So it's a 2-year term, and you have to kind of look at why are you serving as an elected official? Because you open yourself up to liability. People come up and talk to you in restaurants and ask you things that you weren't expecting to talk about at that time. You're in the newspaper many times negatively. So, you know, it's an effort that you undertake because you care about the city and you love it and you want it to continue growing. to the best of your ability. I don't believe that the barrier to entry of incumbency is that high. And I kind of think the whole town digs having competitive races. Like, they like it. We get to all debate, and so if we had term limits, we wouldn't have a contested election right now. Phil wouldn't be able to run. He's been here for a while. Is that fair? Some of us are actually looking forward to a horse race. I mean, so if I look at the current situation and we had term limits, unless other people decided to jump in, that may serve to our detriment. There wouldn't be a contested election. So is that really what we want, where people just get appointed without, the ballots? I don't know. I don't feel that I think the voters are pretty active here. What do you guys?
I mean, I don't personally have a problem with term limits. I don't think, as you said, also the ethical part of this from a financial perspective isn't, I think, something that drives any of us. I think it goes back to what a lot of people said here. It's really, it's not easy to put your name up there, trust me. Just going through this for the first time, but I mean, I ran in a contested race. It was interesting. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to get a lot of feedback. So unless we just had this problem over and over, and I think we did have it with the boards, where we had to go out and encourage and recruit people. I mean, for the last 6 months or a year, those boards were fairly bare. I mean, we had one person on the finance committee that was active, and we had basically one person, I think, go to the budget meeting from that. So we haven't had that overwhelming participation either. So is there an urgency right now for this? I don't know. You guys tell me. I'm way open to the feedback on it. I don't know if there is an urgency right now to do it. Is there, we have to get this done because of X. That's what I'm not sure what the driver is.
Could we do an informal poll somehow?
Non-scientific poll on the internet. I mean, that's so.
Referendum is expensive and it takes a long time. I mean, if it's true that that people think it's a big deal, then we can put it on the referendum.
But
I don't know.
I'm just saying I don't understand where it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to put together a referendum.
So what's a term
Well,
limit?
you have to define the term limit and all
Right.
of the all the caveats. Commission, mayor, is it contiguous terms? Can you take a term off? So you end up, that's all not going to be on one referendum question. That's going to be a half a dozen questions, I guess, right?
Well, how long is it going to take us just to build what that is, right? So you can begin that.
Well, you have a year.
Allow me to interject.
I'll be gone after next month, so I mean, I'm just putting it out there to see if you guys would entertain looking at it and letting the voters choose, and not you.
Choose what?
Choose whether they want term limits.
So allow me to interject here
Okay.
a little bit to facilitate the dialogue. Whether it would be a series of issues or one ballot measure would depend in part on how we craft this. I think there's a good argument to be had that it could be one and just, and set forth what that one is, and it would just require. Yeah, that it would be under that umbrella, but it would be my job to craft ballot language that is not misleading and sets forth that this is how, within the 71 or 2 words that I'm allowed, do you think the city should have term limits allowing for a set-off period and different provisions governing the election of mayors? Things like something like that.
Sounds really clear.
Yeah, but it's not always poetry off the cuff. But
Yeah,
for that purpose.
You could craft a single referendum.
Depending on what you do, if you also start changing the length of terms, from 2 years to something else, then you get into something different. And then people might be voting for one thinking the other. So that's a whole other issue. But beyond that, you don't have to make any decisions tonight. Tonight's about beginning a dialogue. If you wish for that dialogue to continue, whether that's an opportunity for you folks to talk to these people while you're out and about and get a better sense, because this is the first time it's come up. Also, I am not going to be the person who comes up with what this looks like. Greg is not going to be the person who comes up with what this looks like. And I don't think the first time you have this discussion is the best time to say, staff, go forward, and we want it to look like 3 years, and do this, and do that. I think you might find yourself saying, in a position you found yourself in, this body, not 5 of you necessarily, has found itself in the past where, in an effort to quickly address something, you start getting outrage from people who might not ordinarily be as engaged as a citizenry present tonight, and say, wait a second, that was a big change. How did that happen so quickly? Or how did we move forward so quickly? And so that's my only caution, and again, that's not on the wisdom of the decision, that's on the process. So, but if you decide to move forward, staff, your charter officials, would require much more than, we want to see what this looks like. This is too significant a change to say, bring us something to work with. This is a little different than library hours, skate parks, and baseball fields. This is really key to how your legislative body operates. And so if there is a proposal, and if that proposal is to come from this body and not other ones, then that would be my advice to you on the process.
What do you mean otherwise? I mean, how else could it get up here?
Well, I mean, there's the ability to create ballot measures through the
So like
citizen.
a petition or something like that. All right. So
And again, that would be an individual choice. I'm not advising, recommending. I'm just.
But that is an avenue that could be pursued if there were.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
So I've been coming to meetings since 1998. And it's been brought up probably quite a few times since then, but it's never made it here to be discussed. I figured I would bring it up to be discussed, and I'd like to discuss it. I brought it to you guys. I think that the citizens should decide. I'm only 1 out of 5. Next month's my last meeting, so I'm putting it on the table, and I guess I'm gonna let, it'll end up being you guys decide whether you want the voters to decide, or do you want to decide?
Well, for the sake of clarity, I was here when we had the last charter review committee, and of course, this process that Randy outlined, if you were to go forward with coming up with language for a ballot, a referendum, number one, it's up to the commission to decide whether you go forward with it or not. Just because somebody brings it up doesn't mean that you have to go out and a referendum. So you do have to make a decision. The majority of y'all would have to vote to say we want to go forward with this. But, I continue to learn things in my older years, and one of the things I've learned from living in Indian Rock Beach for 5.5 years is it's always good to take a little time and make sure that you've got all the input you need from the public, because I don't need to give examples. If you force me into it, I'll give one. So my advice to you, which echoes similarly what Randy has said, is in my role on this topic, I'm not going to have any advice to you about whether you do this or not or whatever. But my strong recommendation to you is, we sent out. We posted the agenda. People showed up tonight that are for this, that are against this. There's no rush on this, because it literally would take months to do something with this. And my strong suggestion to you is, you've had a good discussion. Let this sit a little bit, and you'll have other neighbors, our neighbors that we all live around, that'll probably give you more feedback. But the worst mistake you can make tonight is try to rush into ballot language and what it's going to say or not. Because that's one of the things that bothered me about some of the emails that I saw. People were making assumptions about, well, if this passes, this commissioner will not be able to run again. Or until the thing's written, that's when you lay out what the rules of if the referendum passed, what the new rules would be. So I would just strongly encourage y'all, as much as Phil says, and I don't discount anything he said about that this has been brought up before and discussed before. I just believe it'd be a huge mistake in a work session tonight to try to sit here and go any further with this. I just let it simmer a little bit, you're gonna get more feedback, because that's what our RV residents do, that's what all my neighbors do. But that's my advice to you, is to take the comments that you've received tonight, go back, ponder it, and bring it back up, and then the majority of y'all can decide whether you wanna go forward with it or not.
So maybe, given that we do have an election coming up, maybe we can put it on the March, like, post-election workshop discussion. Give us, because February is right around the corner for this. People are going to be focused on the election itself rather than term limits. And so maybe once we get the commission impaneled after the election, this could be a work session again. That would give us enough time. Some public notice out for us to talk to our people.
There's no way we were gonna get it set tonight, but it's started. We needed to start it, it needs to be put out there, and there needs to be an actual workshop on it, not, at the end of a meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well then we'll absorb what went on tonight, and we will talk to the residents as much as we can, and then we'll come back at another date, okay? All right. We do any other business to come before this board? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you for coming tonight.
All in favor? Aye.